Silvia, the issue of immigrants, especially immigrant children, I read a part in your book. Yes, they're used as pawns in these political debates, and they're expendable. Their lives are meaningless. What they feel, what their fears are, being separated. This cruelty that comes from the United States government trying to keep a policy of just letting a certain amount of immigrants from anywhere in. But Mexico being a brown country, especially from Mexico, what drew you to delve so deeply into the lives of these broken children?
I think there are a few things. I think first, and I can't, not mention that I also come from an immigrant family, that I myself was undocumented as a child and had similar worries that the children that I met. But most of all, I would say that it was seeing the drawings for the first time when I worked with children in Arizona in 2008, and just visually being able to see their experiences, their emotions, their fears materialize into a visual form. That really made me have a commitment for this journey of writing a book that as many people as possible would be able to see the drawings and understand what these children are going through.
And how about the policymakers? Have you sent copies to the policymakers, whether they're Republicans or Democrats? Because so much of when they talk about immigration is up here, it's not the real thing. And the last time it became a real thing was during the Trump administration, when children were separated from their parents, and there's still children who have not been reunited with their families from that Trump era. Isn't it there where the change has to come? That policymakers read this, look at those drawings, and be there, not just for a few minutes, but delve deeply in there to see, well, we really have to come up with some better policies here so children are not victimized by the United States.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on, Natalia, in thinking about the change needs to be systemic. I write in the book that art does help children cope with the stresses and be able to imagine a better future and imagine possibilities. But at the end of the day, art classes are not enough, and psychological help isn't enough. We need policies to be different. We need legislators and policymakers to see these drawings and to see the effect of decades-long policies, not just the Trump administration, but also during the Obama era and before. I wrote this book with them in mind. I wrote it with policymakers, practitioners, teachers, parents, anyone who works with children, but especially those that are creating policies that will impact children. And we know that all policy impacts children. It trickles down and impacts them the most.
And thank you for bringing up the Obama administration, because the Obama administration has uh, the the distinction, the inhumanity of the Obama administration, where more people were deported during his administration. And there are people who play with math and say, oh no, it just appears that way because it was being done this way or that way. And it's all like, it's like a labyrinth of lies. The facts remain. More people were pulled out of their neighborhoods, of their schools, of their jobs during the Obama administration, and he still is considered a great defender of immigrants, and that is not true. And so we can just say, oh, Trump was awful, but so was Obama. And then the Biden administration is still continuing to really not do anything. In your mind, I know it's a complicated problem, and for people who read your book, they're going to find themselves with pages and pages and pages of bibliography. You have done so much research, so well prepared. What are some of the solutions to understand that there are people who want to come into this country, mostly because of the policies that the United States has done to their countries and exploited them and created violence and narco trafficking and just everything. People don't want to leave their homes because they just want to go. And people don't want, and this idea that many people in this country have of, oh yeah, they just want to cross the river and get a job. Are you kidding me? Would you cross the river and get a job? Probably not. So, without me more haciendo más editorial, is what would be some sane policies that, as you say, everything eventually trickles down to the children, that takes the children into consideration first and foremost when we're thinking about immigration, to the United States.
I mean, you're right in that immigrant communities were incredibly deceived when it came to the Obama administration, because there was a promise that in the first 100 days of presidency, he would pass an immigration reform. And I guess in order to achieve this, there was a give and take between militarizing the border and creating the blueprint that Trump would then use to deport people, to cage people. But all of these things were already happening during the Obama administration. And if we're very honest with American history, this was happening before. If we think about the way that Native children were taken from their communities and put into boarding schools, if we think about enslavement and, taking children from their mothers and parents, and many other times in history. And so this is an issue that was created through policy, and it's created through an ahistorical policy that doesn't see that this is cyclical, that this is a pattern. And to undo this, we need to, one, acknowledge that this is a long lineage of policies and attitudes and perspectives about non-white people. But beyond that, I think if we're thinking about what is happening right now, the first change would be to stop the detentions and the deportations, because out of every 2 people that are detained or deported, 1 child is left alone. And we know that there are 5.5 million children who have at least one undocumented parent. And from that number, the majority, 4.5 million children, are US citizens. And so this is an issue that is deeply affecting not just immigrant communities in general, but the next generation of adults in the United States, as this is the portion of the population that is growing exponentially. And so the first step, stop deporting people, stop separating families. And the children that were separated during the zero tolerance policy in 2018 also need to be reunited with their parents. I know that there has been an effort from the Biden administration, and there are still about 1,000 children that remain separated. But beyond that, if we look at the latest policies by the Biden administration, we see that they're actually not very different. We expected them not to be very different from Obama, but we didn't expect them to not be so different from the Trump administration. And unfortunately, that is the case. So I think it serves as a cold reality check to see how these policies are not changing from administration to administration, and the effects continue to get worse.
Where does this victimization of children, when does it rise to the level of, sorry, what has to happen? Do we need to see, I don't know, 100 children die in the desert or drown in the river or in the mountains or be shot by police? What needs to happen that you think will radicalize this country to say stop with this inhumanity already?
It's amazing to see that the threshold of dehumanization has increased so much in the last number of years. The things that children and families were going through in Arizona were unthinkable. Publicly administrated, media-focused raids that would separate parents from children. People who were undocumented felt like they were being hunted in the streets of Arizona by Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio at that time. And that unfortunately became widespread throughout the rest of the United States when the Trump administration came into power. But year after year, we keep seeing and thinking that the worst of it is happening. We already have children that have died through the rivers, that have died in the deserts. If we saw what happened in Texas, many bodies are found in the deserts of Arizona and remain unidentified. So all of these things, the worst that we can imagine, is already happening now. Children are literally being caged and separated and still remain separated. And so I have no idea what it's going to take for people to see that this is deeply cruel and inhumane, and will not only be detrimental to this population, but to all of us. And that is just deeply unfortunate.
It's children who are growing up with trauma, a trauma that schools cannot address. Then how that cyclical trauma, how it plays out in people as they become adults, where they don't have words. They didn't, as you say in your book, they need drawings to express themselves because they don't have the words. But trauma, one of the things about trauma is that it robs people of words, and that you have to be very intentional with a counselor to learn words. So this also harms the United States. I mean, I'm just thinking of it from the point of view of, okay, if you're not going to think about the children, then think about the strength of the United States, where we do want healthy adults.
Yeah, and even further than that, if we think about it, we live in what the United States and many people and policymakers care about is productivity and capital. And if we think about it through that lens, what does it mean when we have a great majority of the population of these children then become adults and transition into adulthood in unhealthy ways that are impacting their mental health and physical health? Because we know that trauma often has physiological repercussions. What does it mean when we have a great portion of the population that can't work, that can't focus, that is under, incredible stress? And that is going to hurt everyone. But it just seems that isn't enough of a fear or a possibility to stop what is happening, unfortunately. And I think that it behooves all of us for people to really take a look at the drawings and see how children are expressing in whatever way they can and know best the ways that these policies are detrimental in hurting them and their families, and to have difficult conversations with people who we know may not agree with us or think differently, but to really put ourselves in these families and in these children's lives, and be the country that I think many people think the United States is. We think that we're a nation of immigrants. We think and like to espouse that we are about freedom and all of these things like the American dream. But time and time again, we're given the opportunity to prove if that is the case or not. And we're seeing that that is unfortunately not the case.